when you're going in front of us for a CMP exam, the biggest thing that you have to always remember is that your disability was caused from military service. That's the biggest thing. Of course, if you already are service connected, whether that be at 10% or 30% or 50% or 70% for that matter, you want to articulate how it has gotten worse. And so for today's video, which I'm expressing to you guys, I'm coaching you up on how to articulate a PTSD symptom. And be aware, this DBQ that's in front of you, it says PTSD, but it's just for content purposes. This same information is what's inside of your CMP exam when you go in front of it. So if you've been in front of the VA before, you may have noticed that they were writing something and they were talking at the same time. What they're doing is they're completing this form that you see in front of you, which is a DBQ for mental health or PTSD. Now, the bullet point I touched on before is that whether it's PTSD or anxiety or depression, they all rate the same exact way across the board. Your job is to articulate the higher evaluation. And so what I'm going to do for this video is I'm going to articulate how to discuss a rating in excess of 70%. So of course to 100%. I also have a client of ours on the phone as well. He'll be discussing some of his case. We won't disclose his name so for his privacy, but let's hop into it. So the first page here you see is a review for PTSD. It will say the name of the veteran. It'll have your social security number on it. It also will have whether you are diagnosed. And so here, 38 CFR 3.303 goes into the service connection criterion. You must have a diagnosis. That's the first part. You have to have an event in service, which is something that happened in military service. You also have to have a nexus that ties the two. It's essentially an event and a diagnosis. Those things combined create service connection. And the fourth is you have to have chronicity. Now, of course, as you scroll down this document, it goes over diagnosis. You can have 4 or more diagnoses. That could be schizophrenia, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, major depression, it could be bipolar disorder, whatever it may be, it can be diagnosed here. And so let's now advance to page 2. On page 2 is a lot of information, but a lot of this is more what the doctor will do. For the sake of coaching you up on this particular exam, we can skip past page 2. However, at the bottom, I do want to show some level of what this looks like. So if you look at page 2, and pardon me, if you look at page 2, in section 4A, it goes over occupational and social impairment. If you look at the bottom box, it says total occupational and social impairment here. This is 100%. The box above it is 70%. The box above that is 50%. The box above that is 30%. The box above it is 10%, and the first 2 boxes, or the last 2 if you will, where it says no mental disorder diagnosis or a mental condition has been formally diagnosed, but symptoms are not severe enough to either to interfere with occupational and social function or to require continuous medication. Those 2 boxes are 0%. And so if you're at 70%, obviously your goal is to get this bottom box checked, which is total occupational social impairment. That is 100%. So let's go ahead and continue forward. On page 3 is where the rubber meets the road. This is page 3 here. This goes over a lot of the clinical findings, the review of evidence, recent history, what has caused this condition. And so if you're following along with me, if you notice in section 2, under, well, section 5, but part 2, it goes over recent history. This is the most critical part. So relevant social, marital, and family history. As we've already expressed before, social impairment is a big part of your VA claim, occupational and social impairment. And so the social history, which is found in 5B, you want to discuss how things have changed for you socially, how things have been altered from your military service to current day. Perhaps at one point before your military service, you can go to crowds, large gatherings. Perhaps while you're in the military, you were a big concert goer and so forth. But now, after your deployment or after your military service, you've found yourself not being able to be more sociable. You want to discuss those things. You may also find yourself in a position where it may be difficult to manage friends and to make friends socially. You want to express that as well. From a marital standpoint, a lot of us as veterans have went through a divorce, some more than once. Some divorces were our own fault, some were others' fault, some were a combination of two. Whatever the case may be, for the sake of your VA exam, you want to take ownership of that divorce if it has happened. If you are still currently married, perhaps, and maybe have never been divorced before, but there are some marital issues, you want to express those marital issues, but you want to express why they are there and how they develop. And so a very critical way to present this information is, because of my deployment, because of my mental health, because of my maybe the pain you're experiencing in your back or your legs or your legs or migraines, whatever it may be, you want to express how that is causing other things. And that could be marital issues. Family history is another big thing as well. Maybe there was a very good relationship with mom and dad and sisters, uncle, aunt, nieces, and nephews. Maybe that was a great relationship, but after your deployment or because of your pain, it has caused you to have a mood disorder or to cause you to develop mental health of whatever it may be, anxiety, depression, or what have you, and now it's caused strain in the family. And that can also lead to an impairment and an inability to maintain and sustain relationships. We would get further into what that looks like on the next page or the page thereafter about the intricacies of the symptoms and how they can be compensable. And so as we go into section 5C, relevant occupational educational history, ding, 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 once again, we have that word, occupational. Your VA claim, particularly for any mental health condition, is founded upon two principles: your impairment socially and your impairment occupationally. And so here, if you find yourself unemployed for a long period of time, you want to express that. If you find yourself not being able to keep jobs for long periods of time, you want to express this. One thing we definitely teach our clients here in the firm is to do the math. And so let's say, for instance, if you're someone that served, let's say, the Marine Corps or the Army or whatever branch of service, and you got out in, let's say, 2010. And now this year is 2020. It's been 10 years. Look at how many jobs you have held. If you've held a job from pretty much 2010 to 2015, and between 2010 and 2015, you find yourself having 6 or 7 different jobs, that's pretty much more than a job per year, which means that you're staying at these jobs, anywhere between 6 months to 8 months, 3 months here, maybe get another job for a year. You want to balance out what that looks like and be able to articulate that there's an issue with keeping a job here. More importantly, if you find yourself going in different industries, maybe you were a plumber to start off with, then you became a real estate agent, and then you went off to do a tax business, and then maybe you start working at Walmart in the electronics department. You want to express those job changes and those industry changes, because that shows there is some level of occupational impairment. Now let's fast forward. 2015 comes. You find yourself unemployed, and now it's 2020, and you've been unemployed for 5 years. You've tried to find jobs. You can't keep jobs. You can't maintain employment. You want to most certainly express that. But not only express that you cannot keep the job or you've had employment issues, but more importantly, why that has happened. And for a lot of our veterans, for a lot of our clients, it could be disagreements with management. It can be a difference of doing things. A lot of us as veterans, we don't want to work around other civilians. That's very natural. That's happened to you. You want to express that. It could be a myriad of issues. Educational history. What's your level of education? Obviously, someone that has a PhD or a law degree will probably have much more earning potential than someone that has just a high school diploma. And so if you have just a high school diploma, or maybe you have a little education after high school, you want to express that. Perhaps your educational training is in nursing, but you don't want to seek a career in nursing anymore because the gruesome events from nursing may have caused nightmares. Anything that has happened where there has been a recollection of nightmares or thoughts from military service, or any event that's happened that may cause mental health that now affects your job ability, you want to most certainly express that. Not only will it get you more of a percentage in your VA disability, but it also may prompt an event where you may be eligible for vocational rehab, which is another thing we can discuss another time. Now, Section 5D, it says relevant mental health history to include prescribed medication and family mental health. When it comes down to family mental health, if you don't know for sure, like you have not seen evidence that a family member has been diagnosed with a mental health condition, leave it out of the equation, leave out of the conversation. We don't want to give off the appearance as if your mental health was caused by a family member's mental health. We want to paint and present the image that your mental health was from military service, which if you already service connected for it, is there. But more importantly, that it has not been exacerbated by other family members, that it's been exacerbated by your military service, or the conditions that you're currently service connected for. Now, if you have taken any medication, you want to express that, but you also want to express how it makes you feel. And so if it makes it to where you're groggy, where you're having side effects, where you're starting to see other things or maybe hallucinating, you want to express that. More importantly, you also want to express that you do not find any remedy from these medications. And so a lot of veterans that we deal with, they're taking a number of different medications and they find themselves in position where that medication actually makes them feel worse. And so they stop taking the medication, which then makes them react a different way. If that's happened to you, you want to express that. More importantly, you may take medication to treat other symptoms that may cause depression. For instance, you may be taking trazodone to treat migraines, and now that trazodone has caused you to be depressed. You want to express that in here as well. Now, legal and behavior history is pretty straightforward. If you've had any problems with the law, you want to express that during your C&P exam. If you've had any behavior history issues, maybe in the workplace getting written up for certain vulgar comments you may make that you may think that are okay, but maybe they're not, you want to express that as well. Any substance abuse history, be very careful here. And now I'm in 5F, which is right here. Substance abuse history, you can talk about substance abuse, but be very careful of how you deliver that message. The first thing, of course, if you're using cannabis to cope, maybe to sleep, that's okay. But if you're using it every single day, you're lighting up joints throughout the day, that may not be great because now it looks like you're abusing the drug versus using it to treat yourself. If you're using cocaine, PCP, LSD, you're popping shrooms, whatever it may be, you want to be very clear that if you're using a substance, that you're using it to treat your PTSD, even though it's not prescribed. It's okay to express that. What's not okay is to express it from a standpoint of recreational use or use during parties or during events where it shouldn't be used, if you will. So very minimal use. It's not all the time. I think the best way to go with this is to talk about cannabis use and, more importantly, alcohol. A lot of veterans use alcohol intake to, somewhat remedy their PTSD or mental health thereof. You want to see those two. Those are pretty safe zones. Anything outside of those two, cannabis and alcohol usage, like PCP and cocaine and stuff like that, you kind of run the risk of the examiner being subjective and not serving like they probably should. And be aware, these examiners are human, just like you and I. They have preconceived notions. They have assumptions. They make decisions that are going to be binding. And during this time of your exam, this is your time to really articulate every single point, because you only get this one time. And this one time is going to determine where you land percentage-wise for what could be the rest of your life. So this is very important time. Section 5H is other. There's not really much to discuss there. Now, as we get to this next page, this is not going to be on everybody's DBQ list. And now I'm on page 4. It's not going to be on everyone's DBQ list. This is a review of PTSD. And so what this goes over is, of course, you recalling traumatic events. Are you re-experiencing some of these events? Are you avoiding certain things and things of this nature? Do you have symptoms that increase arousal? Maybe it's difficulty falling asleep and so forth. Throughout your conversation with the examiner, these can be really marked off pretty quickly. However, this particular section is not necessarily coachable, but it will be explained as you are talking about your symptoms. Your symptoms and your story that you will present during your C&P exam will help the doctor mark this section off. And in some cases, the content may not be on the doctor's side for this particular section. So it's not the most important per se, but it is something to definitely identify with. Now, this is the meat and potato of the coaching session, which is on page 5. As you can see here, they're highlighted. They're highlighted just so you can see them very easily, very quickly, but they don't really mean anything in regards to which color they are. It's just so you can see them. And so as you can see at the very top, it says, for VA rating purposes, check all symptoms that apply to the veteran's diagnosis. This, ladies and gentlemen, is your money maker. This is where you make your money at. This is how the VA determines where to rate you at, exactly what percentage you should be at, and of course, whether you should get an increase if you're already service connected or you should be established thereof. And so we'll go over these very quickly. We won't go into deep details about them, but I will educate you on them as well. Depressed mood It's very simple. If you're having depression, if you're finding yourself in a funk from time to time, you want to express that. Anxiety and suspiciousness are very clear-cut conditions. If things are causing you to be having to have anxiety or to be anxious, you want to express that. Maybe you can't sit in a restaurant without your back towards the wall. Maybe you're constantly looking over your shoulders. Maybe you, one story we got from a veteran is that every time he walks into his home, he actually takes his concealed carry weapon and he clears his home before his family comes in because he don't want anybody to be in there. Well, to dig a little bit more, we found out this veteran also used to kick in doors in Iraq. He used to clear villages in Iraq as well. So naturally, that became a part of how he basically lived his life. And so if you're experiencing things like that, where you're suspicious and you're doing things that, quote unquote, other civilians don't do, you want to express that during your appointment. Panic attacks, that's another big one as well. But not just the panic attack, but what causes the panic attack. Perhaps it's an experience that you have while you're in military service. Perhaps it was a time where someone said something and it caused you to go into panic because of what could happen from what was said or what was shared or expressed or whatever the case may be. If you're having panic attacks, whether they are more than once a week or they occur less than a week, you want to express that. You want to express how often they happen because there's two boxes here. The next one is near continuous panic or depression affect the ability to function independently, appropriately, and effectively. This is another big component as well. And so if you find yourself having panic or depression that's causing you to not be able to live the life you normally would live, it's caused you to not be able to function as independently as you normally would be able to function or used to be able to function, you want to express that, especially for those veterans that are looking for an increase in their case, because if this is happening, that means that the panic attacks and the depression has gotten worse. And of course, if you're going for increase, you are articulating things are not better, they're getting worse, and more importantly, they may not get any better anytime soon. The next component is chronic sleep impairment. There are three components to discuss sleep impairment. The first is your ability or inability to fall asleep. The second is your ability or inability to stay asleep. And the third is your ability or inability to get restful sleep. And so if you find yourself in positions where you're constantly tossing and turning during nighttime, you cannot fall asleep very well, you may stay awake for several days on end, you wake up extremely tired because you didn't get good rest, you want to express that. More importantly, if you're taking medication that causes you to be drowsy because it treats your other conditions or it treats a mental health condition, you want to also express that as well. Now, the next one is memory loss, such as forgetting names, directions, or recent events, impairment of short and long-term memory, for example, retention of highly learned material while forgetting to complete tasks. And of course, the next one is memory loss for names and close relatives, own occupation, own name. I paired these, or I put these three together to give you one synopsis. If you are having memory issues, you want to express how bad they are. And so if you're forgetting information, if you're forgetting sometimes your relatives' names, if you're forgetting your own occupation, if you're forgetting recent events, recent facts, maybe you have conversations and you don't remember anything that was said, you want to definitely express that. But not only do you want to express that, you want to express how it's gotten worse, especially if you are looking for an increase in your VA disability. The next one is flatten effect. Flatten effect is basically you feel pretty flat. So sometimes you may experience people that are there's a funeral, they're not crying, they're kind of flat. Something that makes you happy, they don't have a response to it. Something that makes you mad, they don't have a response to it. If you're feeling pretty flat, then you want to express that as well. And flat is basically how you would respond to things that normally would make you mad, sad, angry, or upset. The next one, and I'm going to skip over a few of these. I'm going over the ones that are the most important to get you the highest disability rating, and which for some of our clients that come through our firm, 80% of them fall at 70% right off the bat. We have maybe 15% that will fall at 100%, and maybe 3 to 5% will fall somewhere between 30 and 50, give or take. But the overall majority of our clients fall at 70 right off the bat from our coaching sessions, and others do fall at other percentages like 100 or 50. Now, the biggest one here is difficulty in understanding complex commands. That's another one. I'm right here, almost halfway down the sheet. If you're having issues with complex commands, you want to express that. If you're having issues with abstract thinking, which means that there's issues you'd be able to think collectively and abstractly with certain things. You want to definitely express that as well. If you have an impairment in your thought process or communication, you want to also express that. Another big one is the services of motivation and mood. If you're finding yourself where your mood is totally altered for no reason, you want to express that. And that can be from going from very happy to very sad to mad, mad to happy, happy to upset. If you're finding that your mood is totally changed and you don't know why it's happening, I guarantee a part of that is because your PTSD or mental health period has gotten worse, and you want to definitely express that. If you're finding yourself having problems with relationships, maybe it's with friends, maybe it's with within the workplace, maybe you are finding yourself fired from jobs because of problems with your boss or problems with other team members, you want to express that as well. If you're having issues adapting to things, usually you'll be able to adapt to stressful circumstances pretty easily, but now you're finding yourself not being able to do so. You definitely want to express that. If you're having problems with maintaining effective relationships, they may be relationships with other peers that may provide income for you. You may own a business, and you may have great relationships with another vendor, and you're finding yourself constantly arguing with that vendor, and you guys come into odds, and maybe you don't know why. That is a part of your mental health, and you definitely want to express those nuances if you're experiencing them. Suicide ideation, that's another big one as well. Suicide ideation, for this intent and purpose, is the idea of suicide. Hence, it's called suicidal ideation. And so a lot of veterans, when they get to this point, they feel like the VA is going to take their guns from them. They feel as if the government or the VA or the doctor is going to walk them out and watch them as they walk. They may also heard the myth of being admitted to a psych ward. There's myths out there that you can get barred from federal employment if you are a federal employee or you work for Secret Service. That they're going to take your gun from you, or that they're going to of course take your security clearance away from you. That is not the case at all. Those are all myths, ladies and gentlemen. Suicide ideation is just the thought of committing suicide. More importantly, you will want to express how that thought has come about. And that thought may be from maybe you've been depressed for quite some time. Maybe your medications make you become suicidal. So what we like to do is tell our clients, look at your medication and research some of the side effects, or have us research it for you. And some of these medications that you take to treat your mental health actually do cause you to think of suicide. And so if that's happening, and let's say, for instance, you're at 50%, you're warranted to increase because of that. And so it's very critical that you understand suicide ideation is just the thought of suicide. They're not going to take your guns from you. You're not going to be admitted to a psych ward. You're not going to lose your security clearance or not be able to get federal employment. Those are all myths. The way you will lose those things, employment, security clearance, and so forth, is if you go and brandish a weapon, maybe shoot a bullet through a hole through the roof. Yeah, that may cause some issues on your end. But other than that, you're totally fine with expressing and or admitting that you have thought of suicide. Now, as we continue down here, the next one is obsessional rituals which interfere with routine activities. This may be certain routes you take, certain ways you interact with the public. It may also interfere with your activity that you have because you have this obsessional ritual that you do. It could be the way you communicate with people. It could be a number of things you can discuss in this bullet point. And then, of course, kind of summing up everything here. The last one, disorientation to time or place. That's another big one as well. If you are, sometimes you may be lost in the sauce, as they say, and you don't know where you are, don't know what time it is, you want to express that as well. Be very aware that this document, which has, and I'm kind of guessing here, about 40 or so different symptoms, the more these that are checked off, the more your percentage will be, more than likely. And so what we encourage our veterans to do is to look at this list and work with someone else that's close to you. That could be your brother, that can be your sister, that could be your wife, that could be your ex-girlfriend, that could be your oldest daughter or son, that could be whomever you feel you can open up to and have this conversation with. Do this with them, and they can look and say, hey, we've noticed that you do X, Y, Z, and you'll notice that these symptoms will come up very easily for you, and you can be able to express them. Now, during your CMP exam, it's very critical that you do not use some of the language found within the highlighted section of this document. You want to make these your own words. For instance, most veterans aren't going to express, hey, doc, I'm having chronic sleep impairment. No. You're going to say, hey, my sleeping is, for the lack of a better term, fucked up. I can't continue to sleep as well as I want to. I wake up very groggy and miserable sometimes. That's the common language. And so as you're looking at this document, try not to be scripted. Make this your own. Create your own story. And remember that you have to articulate how things have gotten worse if you are service connected already, or how these conditions have come about from military service based upon your experience, whether that be, you could be someone that has went through a military sexual trauma, it could be from a combat deployment, or it could just be from normal day-to-day living in the military. So let's continue on. As you see here, other symptoms, another big one that I want to express to veterans is your libido. And that's for male and female veterans. Perhaps your sex drive is way off. You want to express that. I guarantee that's because of your depression or anxiety or whatever symptoms you have. Perhaps you're having what's called nocturia, which is essentially you urinating on yourself while you're asleep. Nightmares can cause that. Perhaps you have gained a lot of weight because your depression is there, and now, of course, you cannot enjoy life like you used to. You're not running like you used to when you were in the military, perhaps, and you've gained a number of pounds, and now it's causing even more depression. That's another one as well. Maybe you're very hypervigilant. You want to express that as well also. There's a number of other symptoms, but what I want you to do is take this coaching session, embody it, make it your own, look in the mirror and say, okay, what am I experiencing? What am I going through? And take your time to really find out what that may be. And that may take 20 minutes. It may take 20 days. It all depends on you. And so let's continue. Section 9 goes over competency. As you see, is the veteran capable of managing his or her financial affairs? There have been cases, from my experience as a rater in the VA, where physicians may misunderstand this particular question. And I'm going to tell you how this works. If this is checked as no, the VA assigns what's called a fiduciary in your case. And that fiduciary has the responsibility to basically receive all your VA disability compensation payments, pay off your bills, and then give you whatever is left after your bills are paid off, which probably be nothing. If this box is checked no. That means that you are incompetent and the VA kind of words your money because you may not spend it properly or whatever the case may be. So sometimes the way veterans get tripped up in this particular section is the examiner will ask about their finances, and the veteran will go on a long rant about their finances, thinking that the examiner is there to help them. And the examiner is there to help them, but they may misunderstand the nature of this question. If this box is checked as no, you get signed a fiduciary. Now, in the military, we have a thing where if you are struggling financially or if you are having financial issues, you may get what in the Army we call the AER loan, but you may get some type of financial assistance, and then the military will send you to a course to teach you about budgeting and teach you about financing. You'll go through a class and you'll learn a lot of great things. Some examiners may misinterpret and think that box being checked no is the VA sending you to a course or helping you financially when it comes to managing your financial affairs, and that's not the case. So when you're going to your exam, the biggest thing to take away from this particular section is that they ask you about your VA disability. If they ask you about your finances, to just always express, hey, my finances are great. I wish I could be a billionaire. Great, but I'm not. Whatever the case may be, and then proceed forward from there. So it's good to always express that your finances are good and you can manage them. Of course, section 10 here is the remarks. The doctor can write whatever they want to write here. For some of you out there, you may have just PTSD. You may have mental health that's secondary to your back, your knees, perhaps your migraines, whatever it may be. The remarks can go here. The biggest thing to do to take away from this is, one, you want to articulate how the military has caused your disability, which should be mental health, or if you already service connected, of how it's gotten worse. And if it's gotten worse, you need to really understand the CFR on what to articulate to get you there. And so because this is a call with my good friend on the phone here, I won't explain his name. I will open it up so he can express his case, and I will allow you guys to hear how we communicate with a live client on their particular case. And this particular veteran is rated at 70%. He's looking for an increase, which of course would be to 100. This condition rates at 0, 10, 30, 50, 70, and up to 100. That's the rating criterion for anything mental health. And so I'll open the floor to him so he can ask any questions you may have. We'll go into a conversation and then go from there. So, sir, are you on the phone?
Yes.
Okay. Well, of course, you've got a chance to really hear a lot of the information there. I would love to answer any question you have and, of course, see how we can service you.
Yeah, so on my disorder where it says chronic PTSD, do I inform them that that's one of my diagnoses, or do I just lead into like major depression, severe anxiety, hypervigilance, paranoia, avoidance, flashbacks? Do I bring up the bipolar disorder, hypomanic?
Great question. So the question here is in regards to diagnosis. The very key thing here is that diagnosis, at least for where you are in your case, and it's not for every single veteran, but for where you are in your particular case, it doesn't really matter that much. What matters most are the symptoms. So everything you express after the hypervigilance and so forth, you want to express that. As far as major depression disorders is concerned, there is no use of articulating major depression. What you want to focus on is what major depression has caused. So of course, it's caused you to not be able to maintain relationships. It's you find yourself in positions where you've lost jobs because of it. Sometimes you cannot wake up in the morning because of it. I'm going to scroll back up to our symptoms. When you're doing your case, especially for this particular veteran, you want to look at the symptoms. The symptoms are what's going to take you over the top. And for this particular veteran that's rated at 70, you really want to articulate how you have total occupational and social impairment. And so to answer your question, you want to not really focus on diagnosis, but focus on symptoms and focus on how that has caused you to not be able to be socially engaged as well as occupationally engaged, and of course any job loss and so forth.
How often, like, what is the rate of them to go from like 70 to 100?
Great question. So when you go through, so the process you're going through, you just went straight. You submitted e-benefits, and of course you called us afterwards. To be very fair and frank, you called us at a late point because normally we catch veterans well before it's submitted to the VA. In most cases, to go from 70 to 100%, you need some type of evidence already there done by another psychologist, which we have psychologists that work in our firm that do these for our clients to make sure that they have the evidence prepared. But to answer your question, essentially what you need to articulate are two components, occupational and social impairment. So how do you do that? Occupationally, you need to express your jobs. Have you lost jobs? Are you currently employed? How long have you been unemployed? When you were at these jobs, what was your experience like? Were you at jobs for a number of years and then left? Or were you there for a number of days or months and then left? You need to articulate that. You need to articulate, of course, your impairment. And of course, how that has caused issues as well. So your impairment may be, hey, like you said, you have hypervigilance. There's some major depression as well going on. You want to articulate the components of those conditions or those symptoms rather, and how they have caused job loss and your current state of your employment. More importantly, from a social standpoint, because remember, you need 2 points, total occupational and social impairment. From a social standpoint, maybe there's issues with family members and friends. Perhaps you don't have any friends at all. You might be a nomad. We have clients that live in other countries that essentially they kind of couch surf to a degree or hotel it up from time to time and kind of, go from there. And they don't have a one place that's their home per se. And so socially, how are things there? And so take some time to really realize, what are things like in my life socially? Have I lost friends? Do I keep friends? Is there an issue with me maintaining relationships with friends? That's how you're going to get from 70 to 100%. And more importantly, you have to articulate a time frame of how this has been going on. So how long has it been going on? Has it gotten worse? If you're currently taking medication, is it working? Which I know that you're taking a number of different medications. You want to express that medication as well also contributes to you not being socially acceptive, if you will, and not also being working well in the occupational workplace.
Okay. All right. That helped out a lot. Because I know that you said not to bring up, because on my record, I know I saw it said I had alcohol and cocaine disorder, and I shouldn't bring up the cocaine issue.
Well, you can bring it up, but it depends on how you articulate it. Everything is about tonality and how you articulate things. And so if you are bringing that up, you want to bring it from a standpoint that you're using it to cope with yourself. If you're saying that, hey, I'm doing cocaine binges every night. Of course, you live in California. So California is from what we know on the East Coast is like the cocaine capital. Everyone in Hollywood and California, because even though you may not live in L.A. or Beverly Hills or Southern California, everyone on the East Coast thinks of it as such. So I want to give you a picture. If you're living in California, a lot of people that live in, especially in the SoCal area, they're into entertainment. They may be using cocaine as a recreational thing. They're partying every night. If that's not you, which I don't think that it is, then you want to express, hey, look, I've taken some cocaine. I've tried it before, but it's to treat my mental health. That's how I feel comfortable. If you're expressing that, you're okay. But if you're expressing, hey, I'm doing it every weekend, I'm having a great time, living the best life, whatever, YOLO, then you're going to find yourself in a predicament where it appears as if it's not mental health related, but more so lifestyle related, if you get my drift. So you're totally fine with expressing that. You're totally fine with expressing, especially the alcohol. Alcohol is a little bit more acceptable because it's the norm. A lot of people know veterans, use alcohol for this intent and purpose. It's been documented a number of times before. It's also a diagnosable condition as well. So you certainly can articulate that as well. So when you're doing this, what I want you to take away from is you don't necessarily have to avoid what's going on. You just need to present it in a way that shows that, one, your mental health has gotten worse and that you're using these things as a coping mechanism.
Okay. That sounds good. Because I've got a lot of things. I guess, I'm taking from this, just like you said, just, paint that picture of exactly how it caused my symptoms to get worse than where it was at the 70%, to where I can't even get out of my bed for weeks at a time or take a shower for about a week or two, or even wanted to maintain myself, avoiding situations of large crowds or just being outside. I'm afraid if somebody's after me.
I'm sorry, go ahead. And I was saying you're hitting down the nail. You want to express, those times where you find yourself difficult to get out of bed. But more importantly, remember our two components is occupational and social, and it has to be total. And so what I want for you to add to that will help your case is I'm finding myself in bed a number of days at a time, and it has caused me to lose jobs. I'm currently unemployed because of it. Because when you're articulating those things, now you're meeting the components for occupational impairment. Alright, so I think, I got my CP exam coming up in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to log in and thank you for your help and your support. I'll email you or afterwards to let you know the results, and then we'll work from there to see what we can take. I really appreciate it. Everything that you said just gave me I needed it, so it was very vital to have this conversation and to listen in on you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. My pleasure, absolutely. And of course, you have DBQ in front of you. Like I said, take a chance to look at that real quickly. Remember, when you go into your appointment, be yourself. Talk naturally. This is your opportunity. Sometimes with examiners, they may be a little more passive. You want to be aggressive and really share your story, because this is your time to get the most out of your VA disability. So, brother, I wish you well. Go in and do your thing. Be comfortable. Make sure you touch these bullet points, and you should be okay.
I'm allowed to use some notes just in case, right? Because my memory is kind of shot.
Yes, you can. I would not suggest bringing this DBQ in there, because this is basically the answer to the test. But yes, you can bring your notes in there. You can express.
It's a teleconference.
Well, even better if it's a teleconference.
They're calling me. She's calling me. So.
Oh, that's even better. If she's calling you, you can actually have this in front of you and speak at the same time. Just make sure that you don't sound scripted. But yeah, absolutely, definitely use this as a key guide to articulate yourself, because this is a lot to take in, and it's very difficult to articulate our emotions about certain things, and this can definitely help you out. So use it as a tool, man.
Okay, all right. I'll just let them know that, look, I got my memory is not bad. I had to jot everything down that I want to hit on. So.
Right.
All right.
All right, brother. Well, good luck, and I'm happy I could be of a service to you. And just shoot me an email afterwards of how things went, and we'll be on standby.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having my back, and I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. Like, you're a really great person, so great deed, and thank you so much. Really
Yes, sir.
appreciate it.
My pleasure, sir.
God bless. Thank you.
God bless you.